Every small town had its legends, and Garrison was no different. Since she was a little girl, Beverly had heard about the legend of Mary Knott. Everyone knew the story. It was as much a part of the town as the paved streets. It had happened in the late 1800s. Mary Knott was an innocent 10-year-old girl. She had straight black hair and a plain face and always wore hand-me-down clothes. The Knotts were a poor family, and all the children of Garrison liked to remind Mary of that fact. She was bullied every day at school. Some kids called her Hairy Mary because of her messy, long locks. Some kids pulled her hair, or knocked her down, or tripped her as she walked. She didn't do anything to deserve this treatment other than being born poor. Next to the old school was a small lake that people called the watering hole. Mary liked to sit by the water and read her books. Books were her only escape from an otherwise painful existence. One day, a group of kids went to the watering hole looking to harass Mary. They knocked her books and ripped her already tattered dress. She stood up in anger, sick of the bullying, when one boy charged and knocked her into the water. His intention was to get her drenched. He didn't know that she couldn't swim. The kids thought her struggling were a fit of anger, and they laughed and laughed and laughed. But when she stopped moving and didn't emerge from the water, the laughter stopped. Mary Knott had drowned, and the last thing she heard on this earth was the sound of children's laughter. It's said that she haunts the watering hole by the abandoned schoolhouse. Multiple drownings had occurred in that small lake, and the superstitious people of Garrison fully believed that they were caused by Mary, forever encased by rage and death. No one with any sense went near the watering hole. Some even called it the watering hell. There was even a song that the children sang about Mary Knott as they jump rope. Near the old school, there's a lake. To swim there would be a big mistake. Mary Knott rests in the water deep. Beware the person who disturbs her sleep. For if she hears you splash around, she'll hold you tight and make you drown. And as you die, filled with fear, children's laughter will be the last thing you hear. Beverly wasn't sure if she believed the story, but the 12-year-old wasn't about to go near that place. She had always been shy and a goody two-shoe. She had red hair, almost always in braids, and freckles that kissed her face all over. She had friends who always dared her to test her limits. But Beverly liked to play it safe, and going near watering hell was not playing it safe. Beverly had just said goodbye to her friends as she made the turn down her street. Another productive, safe day at school. All of a sudden, she heard a scuffle. She turned to her right to see two men in their 20s engaged in a fist fight in an open garage. At their feet lay baggies filled with some white powder. "You motherfucker, you cheated me," one yelled. "I did not. That shit's all there," the other yelled back. Fists were flying and insults were being thrown when the bigger of the two guys noticed Beverly standing there in shock. Stop it, some kid is watching," the man said. He had a shaved head and a tattoo of a snake coiled around his arm. "Oh shit," said the smaller of the two. He had brown hair and a big scar on his eyebrow. The two looked at each other for a moment before the big man let out a sigh. Beverly was completely caught off guard as he bum rushed her and punched her square in the temple. Everything turned black. When Beverly woke up, the sun was already beginning to set. Her head was pounding. It brought tears to her eyes, which somehow made the pain worse. She couldn't move her arms or legs. Her legs were tied with something. Whatever it was, the same material seemed to be keeping her arms pinned behind her back. She seemed to be lying on the floor of something, but it kept vibrating. Her senses were slowly coming back to her. First was feeling, and then was hearing. "Relax, man. No one comes out here," she could hear a male voice saying. "I've been using that old school for storage the past couple of months. Everyone's so scared of a stupid ghost. that not even the police come out here. Hey, you didn't grow up here, another male voice said. That shit is real. Don't be disrespectful. Beverly's sight was swimming back into focus. She realized she was on the floor of a van. They seemed to be stopped. Looking at her feet, she could see zip ties connecting her ankles. She assumed that was also what was keeping her hands together. Fear hit her like ice water as she realized the situation she was in. What were these guys going to do to her? Disrespectful, the voice mocked. Hey Mary, he screamed. Fuck you, you little bitch. Hey, watch it, the other guy said, as his companion began to laugh. Look, are we going to do this, or what? He continued with nervousness in his voice. Yeah, I guess we should, conceded the other guy as he shut the engine to the van off. Immediately the vibrating feeling stopped, and the two men opened their doors. She could hear footsteps as one of the men walked to the back of the van and opened the doors. He grabbed her by the ankles and pulled her towards him before throwing her over his shoulders, making her grunt. She's starting to wake up, the man holding her said. Then let's not prolong her suffering, the man with the scar on his face said disingenuously. Beverly could see the lake from her upside-down view. She knew where they were, the watering hole. She tried to beg for mercy, but a lump in her throat prevented it, and all she could do was cry. They were walking closer and closer to the lake. Sorry, kid, the man holding her said. You were at the wrong place at the wrong time. With that said, he tossed her into the water. It was freezing. She panicked as she realized that her bonds stopped her from swimming. She was slowly sinking and running out of air. This was it. This is how she was going to die. She was only 12. Thoughts of her parents rushed through her mind, and she felt her heart ache even worse than her lungs. Movement to her left caught her attention. A girl was swimming towards her. She looked ethereal, with black hair forming a halo, and glowing skin giving Beverly a light to see. Her eyes were warm and comforting, and she smiled gently as she took Beverly into her arms. Mary not? This wasn't how Beverly had pictured her at all. Mary slowly took her into her arms, but instead of dragging her down, she swiftly swam Beverly up to the surface. Beverly gasped as she broke through the water and could feel small hands gently laying her on the ground. Her gasp had caught the attention of her assailants, who were already walking back to their van. What the hell? The smaller of the two men said, confused. They both began walking towards her when they saw movement coming from the water. Rising from the lake came the frightening silhouette of Mary Knott. She looked nothing like she had underwater. Her black, dirty hair covered all of her face except for one bloodshot eye and the corner of a blue mouth. What could be seen of her skin was blotchy with black marks of rot. Her kind demeanor was changed to one of horrifying rage. She looked at the two men and bent her neck to the side in an awkward, jerky movement. Beverly heard the sound of choking as water began spewing out of both of the men's mouths. The more they tried to cough the water out, the more seemed to take its place. They were falling to the ground, their eyes bulging and their faces turning blue. The shock of the scene and the night's events were enough to lull Beverly into unconsciousness. Before the blackness overtook her, she swore she could hear the sound of children laughing. When Beverly woke up, hours later, the two men lay dead on the ground. There was no sign of her angel of mercy or the men's angel of death. She found a sharp rock and used it to slowly cut the ties at her wrists, before more quickly cutting away the one at her ankles. On unsteady knees and soaking wet, Beverly slowly made her way home. Thanks, Mary, she whispered to the air. She didn't see the small head poke up from the water and smile.